tithes, which I have given you from them as your inheritance, then you shall offer up a heave offering of it to the Lord, a tenth of the tithe. Right? Now this is something that was put upon the Levites, that when they receive a tithe, they're actually supposed to give a tithe on the tithe, a tenth of the tenth, right? And in case anybody was wondering whether we take the Torah seriously and try to apply it as not just individuals, but as this organization, this is something that we actively walk out. So, and that happens during the Sukkot time, when we send delegates up to Israel. We actually take and send up a tithe of the tithe to ministries that are involved in widows and orphans, people that are promoting the things of the Almighty in the land, and so on and so forth. So, just in case you were curious, that is something that we try to walk out and honor. It's in His Word, and I just thought you all would like to know. That being said, yeah.
This was specifically for the Levites, right?
True indeed.
So,
true indeed.
If the tithe is for the Levites, and the tithe of the tithe was, I don't know what you call it, a statute or an ordinance, how does this apply to us and to Son of David? And aren't we giving offerings?
Sure.
Not a tithe, or what is it?
I am not going to get into a whole, the Lord will bless you if you, whatnot, discussion today. And I think most of you remember my bad joke about tithing. Yes? No?
Finances for destiny.
Okay. So, you know how the prosperity preachers sometimes get up and they say, brother, when I began to sow into the ministry, He opened up the storehouses of heaven and blessed me, and I got the finances and the business deals and the house and the car. And let's talk about the multi-level marketing pyramid scheme or whatever, As it happens, I found that when I began to tithe, my finances were absolutely decimated. So decimate, the old meaning to reduce by 1/10, right? So I know it's bad. Okay, all right. When it comes down to things that we're supposed to give to the Levites versus tithing and offering to a ministry, that's too big of a topic for me to address today. What I can say is that when I get something that comes into me, I try to give a tenth. Whether or not you want to count the ministry Levitical, which there's good case against, and we can have those discussions, but I think it's a big topic to unpack, and I can't say that necessarily everybody has the same opinion on that particular topic. But what I will say is this ministry tithes on whatever comes in, and we try to send it up to Jerusalem. And that's something that the ministry does.
It's a practice. There are lots of things that we do as a practice. The festivals are supposed to be observed. Can't hear you. It's a practice.
A rehearsal, if you will. Okay, I like that thought. For me, I like the fact that we're trying to honor as best as we know how. We don't have a temple today. We don't have Baruch Cohen over here to say, Shalom Baruch, here you go. This is not something that I have in my life. I will say that when my daughter was born, after childbirth, anybody know what the Torah says needs to happen? So after a woman has given birth, depending on whether it's a male child or a female child, they're supposed to go through a period of cleansing, right? For, I think it's 33 days for a male, 66 for a female, and then they're supposed to go up and offer an offering. It's supposed to be a sheep, if I recall correctly, and if they're too poor for sheep, then it's 2 pigeons or turtle doves, and if they're too poor for that, then a tenth of an ephah of fine flour. This teaches us a couple of things. Number one, Joseph and Miriam were not wealthy people. they couldn't afford a sheep. Number two, they kept the mitzvah as best as they could, right? And I see that in a lot of these circumstances, that's what we're doing. I don't have a sheep. I don't have a temple. I don't have a Cohen nearby. So I'm going, okay, what's the best I can do to get as close as possible? That's the way I look at it personally, right? So when my child was born, when my daughter was born, I didn't vacuum pack a lamb and express flight it over to Jerusalem, right? Imagine being the postal service going, crazy Americans, you know, right? Just imagine this shows up, you know, and then of course the in transit, you know, one of the elevator doors or airplane doors goes on its foot and now it's unclean, you know, for Passover or whatever, for a sacrifice, for an offering. So there's another passage in Torah which says if the journey is too long for you, that you actually convert the animal, you have it valued, you convert it to money, take that money to Jerusalem. Because let's be honest, let's say you're 500 years ago, you're off in China somewhere, you know Passover's around the corner, okay, I got to make my journey up to Jerusalem. How likely is it that an unblemished animal is going to make that whole journey with you all the way to the land without stumbling on a rock or what have you, or, you know, some raiding Amalekites say, ooh, mutton, yum, you know. Or you get delayed in the snows and it's like, it's not exactly less than a year old anymore. So there's a passage which says convert the animal to money and take it. So what I did, because I don't have a temple and because I had no way to get an animal to it even if I did, I actually found out what the value of a good lamb was in South Africa at the time. I took that money and I sent it to the Temple Institute, right? Trying to do the best that I can do in the meantime to honor what His Word says. Now, I know that's a different approach than a lot of other people will take, but for me, it's like, okay, I look at the principle like this. If I can offer the lamb, I offer the lamb. But if I can't offer the lamb, I offer the turtle doves, right? If I can't offer the turtle doves, I offer the 10th of an ephah of fine flour. If I can't offer even that, what does it say I'm to offer? The offering of my lips, let it suffice, right? So there's this understanding in the Almighty that we don't always have a lamb. We don't always have doves. And He gives us mechanisms to do our best. But on the other hand, if I have a lamb, but I only offer a couple doves, is that the right thing to do? No, I don't believe so. So on the one hand, the way we apply things may not necessarily be perfect right now. They may not. And we're all kind of trying to navigate that in our own way. I get that. I think the Almighty gets that. But we should constantly be striving to do that little bit extra. If last year you could only do the praise and this year you can do the wheat, do it. If last year you could only do the wheat, this year you can do the turtle doves, praise God. And if last year it was the turtle doves and this year it's the lamb and next year it's the Levite and the temple's been rebuilt and I get to go up there with my sheep, may it be.
Is that because you've been tithing all along, faithful, that you were able to grow exponentially?
You know, I'll let Him decide. I don't know. We'll see. But you hear what I'm saying? And this is how I appropriate it. Again, this is my commentary, right? And I understand that there are different perspectives in the community. Yeah.
I think it's also a lot that we're to acknowledge that nothing that we built from our hands or God from our hands, and everything is God's. And so for us to give up a tenth is nothing. And it's a sacrifice, no matter what it is. It's a sacrifice of ourselves to Him, whether it's monetary money, whatever we can afford in our hearts. He offered us the land, we already have that. This is my opinion, but it's also a little bit in Scripture, depending on how you read it. But, so He gave us the offering, we're to look to the offering. It's the last offering we ever need. But we're still to give of ourselves and a part of ourselves, a contrite heart, a contrite spirit, a willing spirit, and of ourselves whatever we can from Him. my opinion.
Julie?
Everything we have is just not given to us, and all that I have is a gift from God, so my gift is giving it back to Him
Indeed.
in return.
Indeed. Okay, so we got one more comment, then we'll
Yeah,
get
just a
to
quick
the main discussion.
Sorry, just a quick question. So I don't understand the temple very well and all that, but when you mentioned you were previous to the institute, so is the temple that they're building or they're planning to build that now, is that where we're supposed to take our office? In the event that then they finish?
All right, this is a contentious issue. And I understand why it's a contentious issue for a variety of reasons, and I'm going to get into a little bit of that today. I intend to, and I will explain why as we go through, and I think we need to talk the main Torah portion to answer that question more fully,
Okay.
if we can. So, but yes, I would like to answer that, and it's going to be a long answer. Anybody else here kind of understand Korah and where he's coming from, maybe?
Yes.
She's jealous.
Maybe. Maybe he's jealous. That's a common thought. Korah's jealous, right? He wants to seize this for himself. Any other potential things?
He wasn't satisfied with what Yah gave him, what he was
Okay,
given.
maybe. Maybe indeed.
Okay, so this didn't happen in a vacuum. The previous Torah portion, we talked about how they spied out the land, they're terrified, let's go back to Egypt, it was way better back there. They've gone through a lot of stuff. They've witnessed a public execution from some guy who was just gathering wood on the Shabbat. I'm sure that created a lot of malcontent, like, why did he deserve to die? They got slaughtered by the Amalekites. So, again, this didn't happen like one day it came about that Korah got up and just decided to make trouble. I can really see myself in, I've had enough. I think I can do it better.
I can do it better.
Yeah.
Let's take the vacuum and expand. Can you expand the vacuum? Let's expand the vacuum just a little bit further. How did the Levites get the priesthood?
The last
Because
rebellion.
They were the ones who stood up against the golden calf.
Okay, so you're Korah. You're on the Lord's side. You're against the golden calf. Moses said, whoever's on the Lord's side, you're going to deal with the situation. You're going to handle it, right? Who made the gold calf?
Another Levite.
There.
So you're sitting here, the high priest, Moses' brother. I mean, come on, let's talk some nepotism here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. He's the one who's actually leading Israel into idolatry.
And grumbled against Moses.
Sorry?
And grumbled against Moses too.
And grumbled against Moses, yeah, 100%. So he builds the golden calf, leads Israel into idolatry, grumbles against Moses. You're sitting here, you're loyal to the Most High. This guy, he's going to set himself up as a high priest over Israel and lead them into all sorts of sin. Can you let that stand? Can you let that be okay? Are you going to just sit quietly by? We get into these interesting dichotomies of, do I just never say evil against a ruler of the people because he's a ruler of the people, and even if I see that he's like robbing and murdering and pillaging and whatever, I can't speak evil because he's a leader? Do we go to that extreme, or do we go to the other extreme of I'm going to depose this wicked, horrible, evil person because I could do the job better, right? I've lived in South Africa. My wife is from South Africa, and I utterly despise the South African government, right? I look at what they do and what they don't do, and the corruption and the crime and the inexcusable mismanagement. And I get all like, you know what? I could do better, and here's how I would do it, and I just need to... And then I start going off down this thing. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. I can do it better, so I'm going to. Well, here's the thing. Here's just a brainwave for you. let's assume God told me to be here and teach a while. Not in so many words, but let's just assume for argument's sake that's what he wanted. And I look at those people and say, you're not doing your job. I can do your job better, so I'm going to go do your job. Guess what we now have? 2 people not doing their jobs. They're not doing their job, and I'm not doing my job. Korah, by trying to take Aaron's job, was not doing his, among other things. Right? If you're upset that somebody else has abandoned their responsibility before the Almighty, how does that justify you abandoning your responsibility before the Almighty to try and seize the reins or what have you?
That's a new twist.
There's an interesting thing that is a recurring theme here when you're talking about leadership and so on and so forth. We're going to break it up into a couple of categories. Okay? We've been talking about the things that Yeshua has said and some of the other meanings that it might be drawing out for the last couple of weeks, right? Alright. There's this passage where he's preaching to the people and the people want a sign. Give us a sign. And he says, no sign will be given but sign of Jonah. What else does he say? An evil and an adulterous generation looks after a sign. This is a very interesting passage because you have multiple signs take place against a rebellious, evil generation. And all 3 of them have to do with the authority of the one that God sent that's not being listened to, being rejected by the people who want to do it their own way because they think their way is better. We have the first sign, the censers that have been offered. They get beaten into a covering as a sign against the rebels. We have the second sign. If these men die like all other men, I have not been sent. Let the earth swallow them up, and you will know. And what happens? The earth swallows them up. Go down alive into hell. Can you imagine? Oh boy. Doesn't sound fun to me. What's the third sign? Anybody remember? The almond staff. Right? All 3 of these signs that God has chosen who he has chosen, whether you like it or not. Was Moses perfect?
No.
Did he make mistakes?
Oh, yeah.
Was Aaron perfect? Did he make mistakes?
Well,
I know you're all looking at me being like, but surely Matthew never makes a mistake, right? Come on. Of course, we all make mistakes. We all have issues. But anybody that is sitting there saying, well, they're not doing their job right, I can do it better. You do your job before God. That man will be accountable before God for what God has charged him with. That woman will be accountable before God for what he has charged her with. You will be accountable for what God has charged you with. And if you abandon your responsibility, thinking you're going to do somebody else's job better, you have abandoned and rejected the authority of God in your life and in the lives of others. Moses calls this out. Who is Aaron that you complain against him? You are standing against the Lord this day. This happens again, the second part that we're reading about today. Right? The children of Israel, give us a king. We want a king. Why is that a problem?
You already have a king.
They already have a king. See, a lot of people suppose that there was something inherently evil about asking for a king. The rabbis disagree, and I think they're right for a couple of reasons. They disagree because it actually talks about when you go into the land and possess it and say, let's set a king for ourselves. It says, you shall surely set a king from among your brethren, right? In setting you shall set. It's a repeated thing. Does God command sin? Does God legislate? the how to sin? No. He oftentimes will give us a how to deal with it once sin has happened. But he doesn't give the, well, if you're going to sin, here's how to do it. Right? Why? Because sin is transgression of the Torah. If there is a Torah, it's only the violation thereof that is sin. You cannot have a Torah that legislates sin. That's just completely insane, right? So, if he's saying, when you do this, you're going to go into the land, you're going to do these things, you're going to set a king for yourself, and this is how you're going to do it, was he just, he knows how they are, they're going to just mess things up and ask a king for themselves, and then, he needs to kind of create some laws for this? Or was it not what they did, but why they did it? See, a lot of times, something is not purely a sin because of the action itself. Is there any reason you are not allowed to shave in Torah? Are you allowed to shave your hair off for the dead? No. Does that prohibit all forms of shaving? No. Why? Because what if you take a Nazirite vow? So there are some things that are conditional, dual condition. Not just the what, but the why. If you're getting yourself shaved, is it for the dead, or is it because you're taking a Nazirite vow? The why makes a difference. There are some things, the why doesn't matter. Like, I was committing idolatry, but, God knows my heart. Yeah, he does. And I'm telling you right now, the why doesn't matter. But in some things, the why matters. And the rabbis are of the opinion that this is one of those things. It wasn't that they asked a king for themselves, it was why they asked a king for themselves. When we go specifically into 1 Samuel 8:7, it says they have not, God is talking to Samuel, and he says, and I'm paraphrasing, it's not you they've rejected, it's me. They were asking a king for themselves because they were rejecting his kingship. They had decided that things might go better or different if they had somebody else in charge telling them what to do, or whatever was in their heads at the time. But fundamentally, they weren't content with the way God had ordered things. Did he send Samuel to judge them? Or did he not?
He gave exactly what they called for.
It's Samuel. I'm talking about Samuel, not Shaul. Did he send them as a prophet and a judge in the land? Or did he not? And they're like, we don't want any more of this. Give us a king instead. They're rejecting what he has ordained. Was Shmuel perfect? Were his sons? No. Eli? No. Hophni and Phinehas? No. They weren't. You can do a couple of things in these kinds of scenarios. You can either rebel completely, or you can just blindly follow orders. And I think both of these are wrong. Korach should not have tried to depose Aaron. That was not his lane as such. People say, stay in your lane, man. That wasn't his. That was God's. But why did they get the priesthood in the first place? Because when all of Israel was going along with this, and when Aaron himself was leading this by building this thing, they opposed it. They didn't engage with it. They didn't, let's just, forget Moses. They all stood with Moses. They all stood with the Most High and said, this is not okay. When Shaul, right, King Saul, the second king in Israel, if you've got a question about that, talk to me later. It's a long story. But anyway, the second king in Israel, not of Israel, but the second king in Israel, when he said, we're going to kill all the priests at Nob, half of the soldiers said, right, let's do it, and went in, right? And the other half said, forget you, O king, we're out. Right? That's how the story goes? No. They did neither. The soldiers of Israel did neither. they would not raise a hand against Yahweh's priests. They wouldn't do it. That was outside of his jurisdiction. Aaron cannot command you to worship an idol. The king cannot kill you to kill a priest of the Most High. It's outside of their purview. It's outside of their lane, as such. They don't have that right. So if they command you to commit idolatry, if they command you to kill the priests, if they command you to break the Shabbat, or any of those things, that is a command you can respectfully not listen to. Right? On the other hand, they didn't just rebel and say, we're out either. Right? The priests at Nob were still killed by an Edomite named Doeg, right? But the soldiers who were under Saul, they didn't raise a hand, but they still served him because he was the king that the Most High had appointed. And that's the functional difference. Okay? So we have here this issue with Korah. He's seen that the high priest has led him to idolatry. He's done all these things, but they were loyal and all that stuff. But who was it that chose Aaron to be the high priest, and who was it that chose Korah to just take care of whatever aspect of the tabernacle he was supposed to take care of? It was him. And fundamentally, when we try to overstep those boundaries, we're going against him. Yeshua himself said to his followers, if they reject you, they've not rejected you, they've rejected me, and they've rejected the one who sent me. Right? Because it's the same basic concept that you see all the way through Scripture. If he has sent his messenger, even a faulty human who will make mistakes, they've got to do their bit, but so do you. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, yeah? So to answer your question, and this is my answer, and I can't answer for anybody else here. Let's say they rebuild the temple. It's there tomorrow. And let's say some of the priests are corrupt and not doing the right thing. For argument's sake. Because, let's be honest, humans, it happens, right?
Expected.
Pretty much. They've got their responsibility before God, and I can encourage them in righteousness, say, hey brother, Achi, Bavakasha, please, do the right thing. But I still have my responsibility before the Almighty. So if I know that the priest is not doing the right thing in the temple, that will grieve my heart tremendously. But does that release me from my responsibility to do my part? Because my service is a certain amount separate from anybody else's service. Right? I'm not going to stand before the Almighty and give an account for what those Levites do. Now, I might get asked whether or not I encouraged them to righteousness and protested when they did the wrong thing and made a Torah case and said, hey guys, this is what the Torah says. I shouldn't turn a blind eye. I shouldn't turn a blind ear. But at the end of the day, I should still do what is my job, my responsibility. And for me, I look forward to the day where I can bring a peace offering and have a barbecue with the Most High, the way I see it, I mean, who doesn't like showing up with meat and spending time with a friend, right? Or a great king, for example. I've never had the chance to have a barbecue with a great king, let alone the king of the universe. I don't know about y'all, but I'm looking forward to that, personally. Very much. I mean, that would be cool, right? But anyway, so at the end of the day, you may not agree with what some of the priests are doing. In the day of the apostles, right? Did they go up to the temple? Did they tell Paul to go up to the temple and make an offering according to the things that were written in Moses? Did Yeshua, knowing that things were out of order in Judaism, out of order in the temple, did he send the leper to go up and offer the things as a testimony to them? Right? Us doing our part by righteousness is a testimony. of who we serve, even if they don't, we can still be a witness to who our King is and who we listen to. So, the main thing that I wanted to talk about today is finding that balance. Not thinking you have to just follow whatever the leader says, but also if God has sent someone to understand that they are not necessarily perfect, and there is a certain amount of staying in your lane. Don't kill the priest when he tells you to. Don't worship the idol when he tells you to. Don't break the Sabbath when he tells you to, right? Don't do those things. Okay? But you still have to do your job, whatever it is. If we get into this place of we're so frustrated with leadership, we're so bent out of shape over everybody else not doing their bit, how in the world does that justify us not doing ours before Him? Because at the end of the day, do everything as unto the Lord. Your service is to Him, first and foremost. My service is to Him, first and foremost. And sometimes we can get stuck in that place of, is it this way or is it that way? And I would suggest that it's neither. I'm getting a lot of people staring at me.
No, I'm getting out.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Thoughts, questions, concerns?
Well, the thing that sticks with me is the actions of one man led to the death of many, because they were so apathetic or whatever. And so one man, it just shows how much it spreads like a disease. That one man can wipe out an entire by just one little action of what they did, and that's a heavy weight. I mean,
Right, and yet another example, we mentioned it last week with the Rabbi Akiva and his disciples about how they rejected the one who God sent and chose another leader for themselves, and then heaps of them died in the plague. I mean, hello. It's almost like there's a message in there for people. But yeah, when you let something spread through the camp as though a plague, I think there is a lesson in that. And when the children of Israel grumbled, it's so funny to me. Because humans, man, we are weird thinking creatures, right? They come against Moses and Aaron saying, you have killed the Lord's people. How in the world did Moses cause fire to come out and torch these guys, or cause the ground to open up and swallow these guys? How in the world? Right? You've killed the Lord's people. It's like, that's the point where you shut up and wander off. I ain't touching these people. I'm just gonna mind my own business. Right? The wise sees trouble coming and hides himself. Right? That's be on the lookout for when strange stuff starts happening. You're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And if ever a plague breaks out in the land, maybe ask what's going on, why. I think it's interestingly funny, and I'm not going to say that Trump is the Messiah, because he's not.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
But anybody else find it wildly interesting? Because we know that there's nobody in authority unless the Almighty has allowed and ordained it, right? What happened before coronavirus broke out? How was this nation behaving against the first officer in the land, the highest leader in the land? No, we don't need this guy. Hashtag not my president. Hashtag not my high priest.
Yeah.
And then what happens? Plague. Kind of funny how that goes down, don't you think? Just saying. Just, it's interesting to me. I don't know about y'all. And then the flip side, Biden gets in, and you have everybody on the right going, man, he's not my president. It's like, are we behaving any better?
how many thousands of years and we still can't take our consequences for our own actions?
Right?
It's always somebody else's fault.
So, whatever the Almighty decides to do, at the end of the day, I didn't vote for Biden. I wasn't 100% thinking, oh, Trump, he's the most righteous man in the world. He wasn't. And he isn't.
Lesser of two evils.
There's a Master and Commander joke in there somewhere. But point being, are we still acting like the wicked men of this generation? Or can we actually understand His hand is in all these things, and we need to honor what He has ordained and is doing? We've got to be a different generation than the wicked who are destroyed in Israel. That doesn't mean when we're told to come up with wacky new pronouns and to honor those things, that doesn't mean we need to obey orders that are outside of their authority. We don't. We need to maintain a righteous standard and a righteous life. But part of that is not being like these people who are just like, I don't need to listen to you. You're the one that made the golden calf. You know, pronouns move. Sorry, bad joke. Very bad joke. I know. Okay. But this is, I think, fundamental that we learn to be different. That we do not continue in this knee-jerk response the way the children of Israel did. Right? We should learn from these things that were written to us as an example. There's a hand, and then I got one last thought.
Well, one thing is to show that God's hand is still over our leaders. I mean, just before they really went all after Trump, he had recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, which Truman did. He finished God's work that was appointed. So he believes things like that. But, even though he wasn't a righteous man, the blessings still flowed.
And that's the thing. You can not be the most righteous person in the world, but if you do a righteous thing, the Almighty can still bless it. He can still use that. He can still honor that you chose to do a right action. We see lots of examples of this in Scripture. People that weren't necessarily right all the time, but they did something. The Almighty's like, because of this, right? I'm going to do this. What's interesting to me about all of these things, well, there's a lot that's interesting to me. I was talking pronouns earlier with someone, and I was told that a survey was filled out where the answer was like, don't refer to me as they, them. I don't have demons. You know? That was great. That was beautiful, right? I support it. That was wonderful. Like, we are legion, for we are many. It's like if we're talking they, them, we got some issues. You know? I support that fully. That was beautiful. Okay, so we have one last thought, if I may. The first sign against the rebels was this covering that was put over the ark. I hope I hope they find the temple treasures one day, and I hope they see all these things. But I'd really like to see the other one. Or not the ground swallowing people up. I'm not. Please don't misunderstand me here. I would think it would be so cool. Okay, if the archaeologists crack open the cave after how many thousand years, and they find a staff that still has green leaves and blossoms and almonds and a Paleo-Hebrew name for Aharon. How cool would that be? Now, I don't know that that'll ever happen, but there's a part of me that's like, that'd be neat, God. That would be so like, you could say whatever you want. Oh, it's all stories, and everybody had their boxes of gold, and blah, 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 blah. But just imagine being the scientist trying to explain this sealed chamber with this stick, with the name, with leaves and blossoms and buds and almonds. Does anybody know how possible that is? Like, let alone after 2,000 years.
Only possible.
What's that?
It's impossible.
Why?
Except through him.
Except through him, okay. Where do almonds come from?
California.
Trees.
The California farms where they milk them, the little almonds. And they get the almond milk, It is utterly difficult to find how to milk an almond, you know.
I've got yours.
So, does anybody have fruit trees?
Me.
Okay. Where does the fruit come from on the tree? Okay, the branch. Then what happens? It flowers. Then what happens? Okay. Buds. And there's fertilization that happens. And eventually the fruit comes forth. Do they all happen at the same time?
No.
Yeah. It's a very interesting thing. Imagine seeing this stick, and it has the leaves, the buds, the blossoms, and the almonds, and the name. I know, I'm a nerd. What can I say? This stuff makes me geek out, right? But point being,
Indiana Jones.
Spielberg could do it.
So, those are my last thoughts for today. Let's be different than this generation.
Amen.
We may not always agree with leadership. Let's remember what he has charged us to do. Let us honor the positions that he has made, even if we disagree with the people and the things that they're doing. We may not always even obey the things they command us to do, if what they command us to do is against his law. But that doesn't mean we have the right to supersede his authority, because that puts us directly in rebellion against him. Whether it's Moses, Aaron, Yeshua, even Shaul, David himself would not raise a hand because he understood you do not raise your hand against the Lord's anointed. The guy was trying to kill him. Self-defense, right? But he knew you can't do that because then you were going against something that he established. Did he stay around and let himself be killed? No. If Saul had said, come here and plunge yourself on my sword because I'm the king and you have to do what I say, right? No, he got out of dodge. He didn't leave himself in the hand of the one who was trying to destroy him. But he would not raise his hand against the Lord's anointed. We need to be a part of a generation of Israel that does better. That we don't get reactionary because the Republicans tell us to do so. We don't get reactionary because of some crazy thing that Democrats have done, or the Russians, or the libertarians, or whoever. Right? We need to follow what he has established for others and for ourselves. With humility, and pray for our leaders. Pray that God will give them wisdom for righteousness. I mean, just imagine. There was this guy named Shaul who was going around killing the believers. And he was like the leader of this, we're going to go round them up squad, right? Maybe an anti-Christian Gestapo in a way of the first century, one could almost argue. You know. And he has this encounter with the king. You know, if I wanted to quote a Bushism, a 360-degree turn. 180-degree turn. And he goes the other way, right? Imagine if everybody in this land prayed for Biden, prayed for Kamala, prayed for every Democrat, prayed for every Republican, prayed for all the leaders, that Yeshua would speak to their lives, cause them to realize what they are doing and how they should serve him. Just imagine what an outcome like that would be. Can you imagine if all the leaders in the nation got together and said, he appeared to each one of us last night, said we are on the wrong course, and we're going to lead this nation back to God. How cool would that be? So long as it wasn't a ruse of the Antichrist and so on and so forth. There's my disclaimer, right? But you hear what I'm saying. Pray that he gives them wisdom for righteousness. Pray for the city in which you have been taken captive so that it goes well with you as well. Julie?
What you're saying is right on, but it has to be coupled with people reading the Word. They don't know what God is calling us to do. They don't know his character, his integrity, and all the good things that come from him because they don't read the Word. We get it secondhand, in a preacher's version. We get it in sermons, but it has to come from taking the time to read the Word every day. And it can't be, well, I'm going to set Friday aside as preparation day, so I'll spend that day in the Word. No, that's not it at all. It's you've got to have that dedication to read something of the Word every day. It's like when I read the Word, I can feel that hand of God moving and saying, I want you to learn this today, Julie. And I ask him, what do you want me to read? And I write about reading the Word every day. What is it you want me to read? Or I read something and I think, well, that sounds good. Okay, I got it. That's logical. But the question then is, what do you want me to do with it? I read it. Now, how do I process it? And how do I make it livable for me as well as somebody else? So the responsibility is to do what he says to do, but first you got to find out what he says to do, and then we've got to ask him, what do you want me to do with it? And so it begins a process, and that obedience comes with it. But what happens, I found it evolves into a hunger for it, and you create that habit, and then you can't stay away from it. But it has to go back to, we've got to spend time in the Word. And what can I do as me, one person, to inspire each one to say, I'm going to pick up the Bible every day. Every day I'm going to do it, even if it's 10 minutes or 15 minutes. The Holy Spirit's going to work through that time frame that you're creating the obedience in your life to do. And you will be blessed, so blessed.
Can I have just 5 more minutes? I had one more thought that I
We've
forgot
got
about.
5 more minutes.
Go for it.
What's that?
You already
5
have 5 more
minutes.
minutes. So is that 5 more than what you already have, or?
Oh, I didn't know that clock was right. It would surprise me if it was not. The one in the sanctuary is way off, right?
Is that not big enough?
I know. Okay, so it is. Well, I was talking again about the things that Yeshua said and the things that they may imply, right? The more and more I read Scripture and the more I do it in Hebrew, the more I'm astounded by the patterns that I'm seeing, right? And the themes that come along together, right? We have this rebellion against leadership. We have the Levites opposed to Aaron and Moses. We know that there was this golden calf incident, right? And I'm not saying that was necessarily the motivation. Maybe it was jealousy. Maybe it was he's just a first-class jerk, right? But even if it wasn't legitimately a cause, he could have used it, right, as propaganda, to rally up support behind him, yeah? But anyway, the point being, we have a few themes that run together. Rejecting the authority, we have golden calves, we have all these kinds of things. And I was contemplating what happened later in Israel's history, right? Solomon is the king of Israel. He starts leading people into idolatry, right? Because of all the foreign wives that he had, yeah? So he leads people into idolatry. The Almighty eventually says, okay, I'm going to take X amount of the tribes away from you and give them to your neighbor, right? Now there's an interesting thing about this. This is something God has decided to do. Here's a question for you, and it's rhetorical. I'm not asking for an answer at this time. It's more I want you to meditate on it. Did God say, I'm going to take the nation away from you and give it to your neighbor, justify the breaking of covenant that the other tribes made against their king? Just as a question, right? Or was there actually some judgment therein as well? Because what's the very next thing that happens? The king that gets put over them, what does he do? Brings them right back to the golden calf. And I find that really, really, really fascinating. So you have these themes about rejecting of leadership and rejecting the Almighty first and foremost, and it leads to this golden calf scenario. And what's interesting to me is when the people were appealing to the king and they were saying, "Oh, king, we had to do all this work for Shlomo." They're talking to his son now, right, Rehoboam. "We had to do all this work for Shlomo," which sounds like a Jewish king who didn't move very fast.
Shlomo.
Sorry. I know. Yeah, that's bad. All right. So we had to do all this work for Shlomo. And would you please give us a break, man? What does he say? He says, "My little finger will be thicker than my father's waist." Right? "My father chastised you with whips. I shall scourge you with scorpions." A couple of interesting things that Yeshua does when he comes along scene. A, he chastises with whips, just as a thought. B, he criticizes his generation of leaders for piling heavy burdens on the people and not lifting a single finger to help. He said, "But take my yoke on you, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Could it be that he was saying, these kings that were doing what was wrong, that you rejected their authority, I am not like that. And I'm the authority that he sent, and the yoke that you're supposed to take on you. There's so many things that he speaks to that is just pregnant with meaning from the Torah and the Tanakh.
Yes.
That if you are steeped in these things and you understand the history of the rebellion against the king and the rebellion against leadership and the golden calves and the constant times, the regular rejection of who he has sent, and you have this guy come on scene and he starts saying these things and doing these things, what's the message you should take away? Well, the sign is for the rebellious generations, for the wicked ones. What does that imply? Don't be the wicked and rebellious generation that is rejecting the one he has sent. He's saying, yeah, the other kings, they did this, but I will do this. These things weren't said, as Christine said, in a vacuum, right? They were deeply imbued with meaning, in my opinion, my very strongly held opinion. And, okay, it was 6 minutes. So that's all I had for today. I thank you for listening and engaging in the conversation.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and close in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. I ask that you would allow anything that is of you to be implanted firmly in our hearts and in our lives, and let it bring forth fruit. I ask that you would allow us to travel safely home and continue to incorporate your ways into our lives in the coming week, and to honor you with the decisions we make, to not just reject other people for being imperfect, but understand that if you've called them to do something, you've called them to do something. If you've called us to do something, you've called us to do something, and we need to take care of what you've called us to do. I thank you for all these things. B'Shem Yeshua Mashiach, amen.
Amen.
Okay, can I have one more thought? I know. It was one thing I wanted to mention. I'm sorry, I know. There's one more thought. That isn't to say you just need to follow a leader that he hasn't sent.
Amen.
Right? Even if he proclaims the name. Why? I remember the 7 sons of Sceva tried to cast out demons using authority that was never given to them. What do the demons say?
Paul we know and Jesus, or Paul we've heard of, and Jesus we know. But who are you?
Who are you? So, that's not to just give authority to anyone who says they're a representative of the Almighty. Just that's my disclaimer on the end.